Hello everybody, my name is Ikson, otherwise known as the Dramatic Otaku, and welcome to my new series called Read and Review. Now, if you are new to my channel, I collect manga, and I am pretty well known for liking horror manga, especially horror anthologies via Junji Ito or Tatsuki Fujimoto. And because I'm branching out from just Junji Ito for horror anthologies and short stories, collections and stuff like that, I figured I would start a new series called Read and Review. Now, what makes this different to the Otaku Review or the Weeb Wrap Up? Pretty much, these stories, these books will be in the Weeb Wrap Up still. However, I will just be giving, say, my favorite story and a score of what I thought of the actual book itself. I thought Read and Review would be good because I've spent a lot of time in Weeb Wrap-Ups over the last year going through most of the short story novels that I got last year and being like, I like this story but I hated this story, and not really being able to explain why I hated it so much, literally cutting out certain stories that made me like really despise the book. So I thought maybe just having a series where I am just going through short story collections, and like giving my opinions on the stories as they go would be good, thus Read and Review. So this series is reading the books that I pick up that are all short story novels, or horror anthologies, and going through each chapter essentially and being like, yeah, this is what I think about this chapter, this is what happened in this chapter. This is a bit rough because this is the first episode, but today we are talking about Betwixt, which isn't by Junji Ito despite the despite the artwork on the front. This is actually by multiple different authors from America or the US and from Japan as well. So we're gonna jump into it, but before we do, I really do want to talk about the fact that this is not only like horror manga, but it's horror manga from multiple authors from the US and from Japan. And I keep flipping the book because I didn't realize this until I purchased the book, but what's really cool is if you look at the cover art, you see on this side, which is the side you'd read a book in the West, there's this blonde girl wearing a pink dress with purple flowers, and behind her is what seems to be three other girls, two of them fading into the wall, one similarly blonde in a pink dress and purple flowers, and a redheaded girl, two of them with a purple dress and pink flowers. And on, you can also see weird guys down the bottom, but you see a guy just sitting there, like similar to the Amigara Fault holes, stuff like that. On the opposite side, you see a red-headed girl in a purple dress and pink flowers, with behind her a red-headed girl with purple dress and pink flowers, and two blonde girls with pink dresses and purple flowers. Yes, so to put it simply, this side is the English side and this side is the Japanese side, and I really love that the cover is like dual, like either side is the start of the book. And this is actually reflected in the book itself. Technically, this side is the front because it is still manga, and it does have the like actual contents page on this side of the book. It doesn't have it on the opposite side. But both sides of the book have this foreword by Junji Ito. Junji Ito did do the cover art. This is what attracted me to the book. I was really confused at what Betwixt was, seeing as like Junji Ito, for the West, there had been two Junji Ito releases recently, this being Mimi's Tales of Terror and Shoichi's Tales as well. So to see one that's Betwixt that didn't have Junji Ito's name attached to it but had his art style, I was really confused, so I really wanted to pick it up. But on the Japanese side, there is the contents page. On the English side, you actually have, as I said, the foreword. I just poked myself. And you also have the credits of it as well. But this is the first page of the English side. So, and also when I opened this book and saw this, I was like, American. This is very Americana type art. But I find this very interesting. There is 3 English or 3 Western comics on this side and 3 Japanese comics on this side. Now we're gonna get into each one of them, starting with the Japanese side. Story on the Japanese side of Betwixt. This being, I believe, Kame. Yeah, Kame. This was actually pretty enjoyable. I liked the concept. It is like a little bit weak, but like for a fantasy horror, then yeah, it's actually pretty good. When I say weak, I mean like I went into this seeing Junji Ito and he only did the foreword and the like thing, but I think the one thing that took me out of this the most is that either this is set in 2025 or the author doesn't know how old people in 2001 are, because how old are you? So how old are you? I'm 24, so are my friends who came with me. What year were you born? May of 2001. Now, I don't know if you guys realize this, but I was born in November of 2001. I can tell you for certain the oldest 2001 person is at most 23. So either the author doesn't know basic math or this is set in 2025. So I'm just like, plus there's no actual like date or time in this. The only date mentioned is like May of 2001, and this character is 24, meaning this story has to be set in 2025, which doesn't make sense to the story whatsoever. It just gives like a date of death for Kame. August 3rd, Kame died when she was 16. That would be 2017. August 3rd of 2017, this girl would have died. So I now know the death day of Kame. Overall, Kame is really good. I actually really like this story. I don't know what it is about it. I feel like the like dad for being a murderer is way too casual about it, and there is a couple of like plot points, but for like a short story, it's pretty good. There's one story that I want to compare it to, and I can't remember it at the moment. I think the one I'm thinking of is from erotic horror, and it's the like ghost girl one. I think it's slightly similar to this, except there's like not really a romantic element. It's more so like a friendship element in this story. Second chapter. It's been a while since I read the first chapter, but this is film ephemeral, I guess. Ephemera, film ephemera. And this one, I'm not like huge on the plot, but I do like the imagery. So like what happens is it's pretty standard for a lot of horror stories where the main character can see ghosts, and the big 3 rules is ignore them, don't tell others, and try and stay away from them. He is a assistant to a mangaka, and that's his job, but it's not talked about a lot. But he's also a bit of movie buff. He goes to the movies because there is a flyer that intrigues him. And he likes it so much that without him realizing, he essentially brought home a stack of these flyers. And the flyers is just like a man with like a bunch of holes next to him. It's a bunch of the man. What he does is, for some fuck off reason, he hangs up all the posters, because he has so many, in his closet. That night, he hears a bunch of scratching and cracking coming from his closet, and then what slides open is this woman. Now, this genuinely shocked me to see this pop up on the next, like, page. Genuinely, I love the imagery. It's, like, creepy, obviously, but, like, just the body horror of it all, fantastic, especially since, like, you hear all this scratching and stuff and she doesn't have arms, so she's like, so you're like, is there more than just her? Is she, like, the placid one? The answer's no. She goes to work, the guy goes to work next day, and one of his friends says that they need to, like, crash for the night, and this friend can't see ghosts. And when they get back to the house, the woman is still there. Obviously, the friend can't see it, but the guy can, and he's really unnerved by it. The friend goes to the bathroom, and the main character has to get something out of the closet. When he does, he sees all of the posters and then gets grabbed by a bunch of hands. The ghost woman then says, "Caught you, I know you can see us, blah blah blah, I know you can see me." And he nearly gets dragged in until his friend pulls him out and goes, "What the fuck are you doing?" To which the main character then promptly rips out all of the posters from his wardrobe, and the woman who scared the shit out of him disappears, and she's never seen again. And he then, in the end of the film, just tells the person he's working for, "Hey, this is what happened to me, this would make, like, a really cool manga." And she goes, "Cool. There's no ghosts in here, is there?" Imagery wise, love it. It's just not a lot story wise. Like, the first story was very heavy plot wise, but not all that much body horror wise or gore wise, or, like, it wasn't more than a psychological horror. This story is much more visual horror and gore, and has less of an actual plot. Like, it's sort of just a series of events occurring because this character can see ghosts, and the threat is this one ghost that is freaking him out. That's really it. Like, for a one shot, it's pretty good, but I kind of wish there was a little bit more. Like, if that ghost had secretly been, like, very placid, just really, like, scary looking, and that there was actually a much bigger threat, but I guess that would be the case if it was for a much longer series, so whatever. But personally, I like the first one more story-wise, though genuinely the design of the ghost character is really, really fucking good. It's like 30 degrees today, so you're gonna have to deal with the fan in the background. That's why I have the tiny mic. So, the final of the Japanese stories, The Window. Personally, horror-wise, not a huge fan. It's not all that horrific. It's actually more of a commentary on horror while also having horror elements, and I like that. That's actually something that I really like about the story itself. The story is basically a man is moving out and gets his sister to help him move out, and the sister wants to open the window, to which he says, "No, you'll be cursed if you open that window. That was what I was told when I moved in, but now I'm moving out." And so she is very skeptical of it because he's been told that the ghost is a woman, and that this woman has been tortured. She murdered her son, or she had a miscarriage, stuff like that. It's a very stereotypical Japanese ghost story, or of like a vengeful woman, you know? And they literally bring up Oiwa and Okiku for this, which I thought were very nice touches, as someone who was obsessed with Okiku in 2019. But The Window is more of a commentary on the difference in ghost stories from the past and now, and how a lot of ghost stories, especially in Japan, are more rooted in, like, femicide, feudalism, femicide, and lookism, stuff like that. And I personally really like it as this commentary on especially older world ghosts. And like I've talked about multiple times in like horror reviews how I want to do like a review on horror movies from like a female perspective, on like femicide, and how women like horror stories are essentially like use women as a palatable form of murder and stuff like that. How women are used as props in horror and stuff like that, and how it's very voyeuristic and stuff like that. The Window does talk about that, and it is a critique on that, and I like that as a horror story. But the added element is that there is actually a ghost, but this ghost is not a woman. And that anyone who has opened the window and looked out has seen this ghost and has been scared shitless. So the reason they use a woman and say that it's the ghost of a woman who killed their child is to make the story more palatable for people and scare them more so that they don't open the fucking window. Which I do actually find a very interesting concept, especially when the person who opens the window isn't the brother, it's the sister. And conceptually, I think it's really, really interesting, and I like the critiques of, especially like Japanese horror, but like of more so ghost stories and traditional like horror stories, stuff like that. Because even in the West, there's a lot of like horror surrounded around women as well. Usually in like a reverse position, but whatever. I like the critiques of horror, and I like that there is still a monster. The actual horror aspect of it, though, wasn't a fan of. I actually wasn't all that surprised when, like, the monster wasn't a woman. And, like, the actual look of it wasn't all too scary. I liked it more for its critique of horror, ghost stories, old world ghost stories as well. Not so much of the actual visual depictions of horror and the plotline, because there was a lot of talking, which critique-wise, very good. Actual horror-wise wasn't the greatest, because it was just two characters talking to each other for about 20 pages, you know? Story-wise, I liked Kamei more. Film, like, visual depiction of horror-wise, I liked Film Ephema. And like critique-wise, I liked The Window. So now we move on to the American stories, and let's see how different it is. Okay, for one, don't talk about my hair. My hair is a mess. I need to re-dye it. Anyway, so I pretty much read all of the English chapters of these when I was out just before work, and like at my partner's as well. So there are 3 stories, much like there is on the Japanese side, and here are my reviews of them. First of all, we have the first story that made me open it and go, America, because this is very clearly American comic stylings, but this is the story Never Left, by stories by Michael W. Conrad and Becky Cloonan, and the art is by Becky Cloonan. So, first of all, Never Left, pretty solid. It took me too long to realize that the character's name was Johann, not Joanne, because it's spelt Johhann. So it took me a little too long to realize that the protagonist, who is this one here, their name is Johann. The concept is Johann is going ice fishing when he runs into an old friend who went missing 13 years ago. They have had a chat on where Emil, the friend, went for 13 years when a body is pulled out of the ice fishing hole. And it's Emil. It's Emil's body. The body suddenly reanimates and calls the alive Emil a pretender, causing the alive Emil to freak out so much that he goes to kill both the body and Johann. Johann, in defense, essentially kills the alive Emil, and the ice body explains that he was the original Emil, who got dragged and trapped under the ice for 13 years. Johan, not sure on which Emil is the real one, is left confused and questioning his entire life. So, this story is much more of a thriller than a horror. There is a little bit of gore, as you can see, but it is mostly a thriller, which I don't mind, but I'm much more of a gore kind of horror buff. I don't particularly like thrillers all that much. It's just it always builds up way too much for something that's just not enough payoff, and with horror I think it's slightly the opposite, where the build has a conclusive payoff that is worth it. Thriller just isn't that. It's just continuously building and the payoff is a bit shit. So I thought this was more of a thriller than a horror. There wasn't a huge amount of gore, and I will say it is a very thrilling story, but with how many body swap horrors and body swap thrillers that have come out recently, think of the likes of Us, stuff like that, where it's becoming a very common trope in Western horror. This really didn't appeal to me as much, seeing as it is now a very common trope, especially in the horror scene. It's not bad necessarily, and the ice fishing is a nice twist on the genre. It's just not the story I would typically pick up, especially with the art style. As I said, I opened it up and thought, oh my god, this is Americana. That's what got me so confused about Betwixt, because I hadn't realized Japanese side, English side. Also, kind of makes sense because the US side character's blonde. Yeah. Anyway, next is the second American story, which is Mirror Mirror by Sloan Leong and Leslie Hung. I'm so sorry if I mispronounced that surname, but the story is by Sloan and the art is by Leslie. So, this one, I like the art style a bit more. It's a lot more softer, and I really appreciate that. The story is called Mirror Mirror, and I didn't really write anything down for what the plot was. Basically, a woman is helping her grandmother clean out her attic, and they find a mirror. The grandma says it's cursed, or it's bad luck, because a girl who didn't like the grandma gave it to her and her husband on their wedding day, because and she thought it was bad luck because the girl always wanted the grandma's husband. The granddaughter, the main character of this story, puts the mirror in her room, has a really bad day at work, goes and cries in her room when she sees the mirror and sees something strange in the mirror. She asks what it is, and the mirror replies, anything you want me to be. And it's another body swap. You see why I didn't actually write the synopsis? So I see the vision, but this one was straight up just cliche. Girl finds cursed mirror. Cursed mirror is cursed and has demon in it. Demon switches with her and takes over her life. In the end, she gets trapped in the mirror and switches hands, and she becomes a demon. Personally, I've seen way too many of these stories in both Western and Eastern horror media for my liking, as the trope is done over and over and over again, especially in Western media. Case in point, Never Left is the exact same concept, executed much better due to its thriller nature. Both stories are just a body snatcher taking over the life of the either protagonist or antagonist. So that's what Mirror Mirror is. It's just a body snatching story, and it isn't my favorite. It is probably the most cliche version of a body snatching story you can have. I wasn't super invested in it, and so it kind of just let me down. I appreciate the art style, but it's nothing to call home about. Now, the last one, Shadow. This one is my favorite story of the entire book, of both sections. It is my favorite story, and this is by, I'm gonna butcher this name, Hua Zhu, I believe. I'm so sorry if I butchered that name, but it is called Shadow. For the final story I read, this one was fan-fucking-tastic. It is simple and effective, and I may also be biased because it has a cat in it, but the art style is honestly wonderful. It's really stylized and kind of not simplistic. It's very stylized, and the use of like lighting in it is really, really nice. And I like the sort of scratchy element to like the design of some of the characters, especially like the cat character, and like how it's purposefully scratchy. But I also like the way that everyone else in this character's school is drawn. Like the teacher is a completely different style compared to our protagonist. So Shadow follows the story of a girl who's found a stray cat and names it Shadow, finding herself late to school after adopting Shadow from the street. The story goes through the exam period of our protagonist's school as she struggles with school, new haunting nightmares, and the only thing keeping her together, Shadow. However, as exams come by, our protagonist gets bitten by Shadow, who's grown increasingly violent as the story's gone on. As she's at her exams, her mum gets rid of Shadow, leaving our protagonist upset, but life goes on. Miraculously, her nightmares disappear, and school is school. But in the final 5 pages, we see a scene of our protagonist's house at night. A very simple setting, but up the stairs to the attic where Shadow stayed is an increasingly growing shadow. On crawling down the stairs, it almost seems like a person is walking down the stairs when a shadow monster finds its way into the main house. It's almost like seeing a person walking downstairs. When the shadow monster finds its way into the main house, it's chilling when the final words are, "There you are." That's the wrong fucking thing. It's chilling when the final words are, "There you are." That was a bit fucking muddled, but it's really hard to describe what the fuck's going on in this story. It's really fucking good. But honestly, this is the best horror story in the entire novel. It draws you in with its simplistic but relatable plot and really takes advantage of the horror in the mundane, especially taking advantage of people's fear of what is lurking in the dark. But I was really taken in by the 4-panel spread of the house, only having the 4th panel with what looks like a man's legs coming into the main house, only to turn the page and there's a smiling shadow monster there. I also love the uncanny valley nature of the classmates and the teachers in the school setting. It adds a level of disturbing that also has purposeful visual storytelling functions that our protagonist is othered in the class. There's also just a lot of layers in the very simple looking story that I really appreciate. Honestly, my favorite from the book, as I definitely got jump scared by that shadow thing. I was like, you see it develop throughout the story, the shadow thing. But like, as I said, this panel down here is the most important because it kind of just looks like a regular shadow the entire time. And then you just see legs. And I saw that and like had to double check like that my eyes were working. Then I flipped the page and there's a fucking smiling fucking shadow. I actually got scared of it and it's like, there you are. It's like, I don't care what you say, if that's cheap or if that's like very basic. That is scary. That is fucking scary. Returning back to me, this has been a bit of a mess for the first video on the series, I promise. Much like the way we wrap up, this will get better. For Betwixt as a whole, generally, I think I liked the Japanese side overall more. I think I liked the like variety of story more, even though I'd seen the same styles before. I just didn't like that there was essentially 2 of the same story in one portion on the English side. However, my favorite story out of all of them is on the US side, and that would 100% have to be Shadow. I also found out just through my research into each author that almost every single author, with the exception of Michael W. Conrad, who was the writer for Never Left, are women or genderqueer. So to me, that puts in a new perspective to a lot of the stories, especially into the criticism that's in the window, being genuinely and distinctly from a female perspective or a genderqueer feminine leaning perspective. Betwixt, my favorite story is Shadow, probably then followed up by the first one that I read, which was Kamei, I believe. I would say solely for the horror, Film Affirmer comes next. Then probably The Window and Never Left are on the same sort of par for me, and Mirror Mirror personally has to be my least favorite from the entire book, just because I really wasn't a huge fan of it. Again, it felt very samey to Never Left in terms of like what the premise of the story was. I feel like I've watched that like story before, if that makes sense. Like I've seen the body snatching mirror thing before, and so like it didn't necessarily feel new or fresh, or wasn't a new spin, or wasn't a new story in that sense to me personally. Other than that, yes, I wouldn't say Mirror Mirror is my favorite. Also, The Window necessarily wasn't my favorite. It was my least favorite of the Japanese stories as well. And Never Left also wasn't that great to me. Overall, Betwixt, I'm very mixed about. It was a lot of different authors, which I'm really liking, that I'm getting into a bunch of more different artists. I'm like very interested in Zhu now. I actually wanted to go see more of their works after this, just because of how invested I was in their story in Shadow. So yeah, personally, as a whole, I reckon Betwixt, out of all of my short story collections, I'd say it's definitely the most diverse. Obviously, I only really ever read Junji Ito or Tatsuki Fujimoto, with the occasional josei or shoujo horror as well. I would say this one probably has the most authors, and I would give it 6 or 7 out of 10, just because it was very hit or miss, very good at some points, very bland at other points. So for Betwixt, 7 out of 10. Shadow is my favorite. Mirror Mirror is my least favorite. Would I recommend this? Yes. If you like Junji Ito, if you like Tatsuki Fujimoto, yes. Because this is not only, as I said, Japanese artists, it's English artists as well, or American, US artists, I guess, Western artists. I would absolutely give it a read, just to expand your horizons more onto what else is out there, especially since a lot of these guys are smaller artists. So yeah, that has been my first episode of Read and Review. A little bit sketchy, but yeah, this series isn't going to be too often, just because I don't pick up enough short stories to make this like a monthly kind of thing. But every so often you'll see one of these videos, and I'm not going to put this in the Weeb wrap up, but I will put my tier list of Betwixt in the Weeb wrap up and my score of Betwixt. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know my first 2 videos have been a bit iffy for the start of the year. I have more planned, it's just that I haven't gotten around to do it yet. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next week. Bye!